Amen. All right, if you are able, would you mind just standing as a sign of honor as we read from the scriptures? I'm going to be reading from the Gospel of Matthew, a short section from chapter 5, as well as a section from chapter 10 of the Gospel of Matthew. These are the words of Jesus. Blessed are those who have been, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And then from Matthew chapter 10. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it. Amen. These are the words of the Lord. You may be seated. I was going to put that first slide up. Kinamute. How many have heard of this word? It's not from the Lion King. It's not a Greek word in the Bible. Kinamute. It's actually a form of martial arts fighting. A form of martial arts. It emphasizes biting, pinching, slapping, and eye gouging. The goal is to manipulate and control your opponent by inflicting pain. In other words, it is martial arts dirty fighting. Kind of like how hitting below the belt is in boxing. Now, when it comes to relational conflict, sometimes we have a tendency to fight a little dirty. Things like silent treatment, blaming or attacking, name-calling, criticizing, sarcasm, denying or justifying our poor behavior, walking away, avoiding conflict altogether, being aggressive by shouting or using anger, or being passive-aggressive, resisting quietly in stubbornness, or lie, either by saying something untrue or holding back your true feelings, showing contempt instead of honor. And there's all kinds of other ways that we can fight a little dirty. This morning, I want to talk about fighting with integrity. This is part of our Practice of Community series. And as part of this practice of community, we're exploring community. And genuine community is not something that just happens organically. We have to be intentional. We actually need to learn good community skills. We need to practice community together, and that's what we've been doing over the last few weeks. And we've covered a lot of things like community as family, moving from isolation to belonging, a community of honor, a community of reconciliation. This morning I want to talk about being a community that fights with integrity. Now some of you are probably confused. Wait a minute, fighting doesn't really sound very Christian. And, for me and Karen, we definitely are way too spiritual for fighting. We just have times of intense fellowship. Which is Christianese for we had a fight last night. All right. Some of you are obviously a little too excited about this topic. It's about time we talked about fighting. I've been preparing this my whole life. All right, but this morning, whether you love fighting or hate fighting, I want to invite all of us to reimagine what it looks like to resolve conflict based on the example of Jesus. For he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Yet a few chapters later, he said, "Do not think I came to bring peace. I came to bring a sword." So is Jesus schizophrenic? Or is there a way to make sense of these two statements? And I want to propose to you that these two statements actually complement each other. And the basic idea is this. The basic idea is this that I want to get across this morning. That sometimes, in order to bring true peace, false peace has to be confronted. So what is true peace versus false peace? True peace, when you look at like the Hebrew word for peace, it's shalom. It's a really fascinating, beautiful, rich word that is just far more full of meaning than the English word peace that we translated into. But shalom is really, it's not merely the absence of conflict or the absence of a problem. It is the presence of something much better. Shalom can apply to every area of your life, but shalom in a relationship is the presence of harmony and working together for the other person's benefit. Shalom in a relationship is unity, it's intimacy, it's joy, it's trust, it's mutual blessing. That's shalom, not just the absence of conflict. And I've seen many marriages that have an absence of conflict. The marriage works, if you will. They've learned to live with each other as they are, yet the marriage lacks deep intimacy and genuine joy. They have like this unhealthy system, if you will, that's a false peace. And unless that false peace is disrupted, they will never experience something better. True peace, God's peace in that relationship. So disruption's not the goal. Genuine peace is the goal, but sometimes disruption is necessary to achieve the goal of true peace. And so when Jesus brings the sword, it's against false peace so that true peace can come. False peace is basically pretending everything is okay when it's not okay. Seeking to appease or avoid upsetting people by saying nothing, pretending nothing is wrong, or dismissing your own needs or hurts. It's a false peace. It's rooted more in fear than in love, afraid of hurting someone's feelings, fear of upsetting others or being disliked. Now, personally, I hate conflict. I spent much of my early life avoiding as much conflict as I could. I hate conflict so much, I would rather be taken advantage of than have conflict with someone. I was so happy after becoming a Christian to read Jesus say, "Blessed are the peacemakers," because it gave me a spiritual veneer for my conflict avoidance. I don't have a character flaw. It's a spiritual virtue. But I learned the hard way that I was interpreting what Jesus said all wrong. I also realized, and I realized conflict avoidance is not peacemaking. And I also realized I was often lying. Not in the sense that I would say something that was untrue, but in the sense that I would stay silent and not say what I was really thinking or feeling. Now, my wife is more of a fighter. Not that she's looking for conflict most of the time. But if there is a problem, she is not going to pretend everything is okay. She's also not afraid to speak her mind. And in those early years, me trying to appease and avoid conflict actually only made our marriage worse. And the first step to bringing genuine peace to our marriage was learning to disrupt the false peace. But then the second and the more important step was learning that when we had conflict, how to engage with each other with integrity. The point of conflict is not for one person to win at the expense of the other losing. Winning is when you bring true peace, shalom, to the relationship. And that won't happen when you fight dirty. And there are different ways to fight dirty. You can fight dirty by being aggressive. You could be yelling, getting angry, name-calling, criticizing, gaslighting, being violent even. You can fight by being passive, avoiding conflict, keeping quiet, walking away, pretending everything is okay when it's not okay. You can be passive aggressive, acting compliant while quietly resisting. In our early years, I was the passive aggressive one. Yeah, she's up there nodding. I would smile and nod, yes, honey, and then walk away and ignore everything she had just shared. Karen, on the other hand, she's sitting in the front row. My fear of conflict is coming back up again right about now. I was the passive-aggressive one. She, on the other hand, was a bit louder. There, I said it. But you know what? We should just move on and pretend everything is okay. Anyways. But being aggressive or passive-aggressive, none of that brings true peace. The way of true peace will never come by pretending what is wrong is right. And it will not come by fighting dirty. Jesus will not build his kingdom on lies, on falsehood, on fear, on anger. He builds his kingdom on genuine love. And of course, Jesus is the true peacemaker. And so I think we can learn a lot about looking at his life. And when we look at his life, he actually had plenty of conflict and trouble. And he never tried to avoid it. He was never afraid to disrupt the false peace. Yet he fought with integrity, with love, and with truth. I love the book of Revelation, and the book of Revelation has this really fascinating image of Jesus. And it's in chapter 19, and Jesus is pictured as this military leader leading an army to defeat evil on the earth. And he's riding a white horse. He's like a king leading his army. And he's covered in blood, and he's yielding a sword. It's this very violent military image of Jesus coming to fight evil. But when you look at that image a little bit closer, you're going to notice some important things. Number one, the blood is not from his enemies, it's his own blood. And two, the sword is not in his hand, it's in his mouth. And the whole purpose of that image in the book of Revelation is to help us reimagine what fighting with integrity looks like. It looks like love. Jesus would rather die for his enemies than beat them. It looks like speaking the truth. Jesus does not attack people. He attacks lies and falsehood by speaking the truth. The Apostle Paul had some great teaching on this as well. Ephesians chapter 6, you may be familiar with. He says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers that stand in the way of unity and peace. When we view the fight as between people, someone wins and someone loses. And again, that doesn't bring about true peace. Instead, we're fighting against that which prevents peace from coming. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I think the biblical worldview is so important. And I talked about this, I think, during Easter. Part of the biblical worldview is that there is more to this world than meets the eye, meaning there are unseen spiritual forces that are also at work in the world, and some of those forces are evil. And if you don't understand that, or if you don't believe that to be true, the only other option is to see other people as your enemy. And all that's going to do is end up with more conflict and not less, which is exactly what happens in the world. But there's a different enemy that we're fighting against, and it's not people. It's the powers and the forces that are at work to bring or against unity and peace. And oftentimes they'll work to bring false peace. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul says that our weapons of warfare, notice the military language there, but he says they're not of the flesh. They're divinely powerful. And these weapons destroy not people, they destroy arguments and arrogance, Paul says, that is raised up against the knowledge of God. In other words, it's meant to destroy ways of thinking, patterns of behavior, the pride within ourselves that actually stands in the way of the nature and the kingdom of God coming. And so we're fighting against arguments. We're fighting against mindsets and attitudes and behaviors that prevent genuine peace from coming. In other words, Paul's saying we don't fight dirty. We fight with the same integrity as Jesus. So let's look at Jesus as the peacemaker. And I want to look at Luke chapter 19. I'm just going to read a couple of things there. And this is Jesus. He's entering Jerusalem. He's approaching Jerusalem. He enters Jerusalem. This is the week before he is crucified. And it says, when he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, if you had known in this day the things which make for peace, but now they have been hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will throw up a barricade against you and surround you and hem you in on every side, and they will level you to the ground and your children within you, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation. And so as Jesus is approaching the city, the place where all of the opposition against him was focused, and he's heading into the hornet's nest, and he knows that they are going to reject him and kill him. And what is his response? He's been dealing with them for 3 years. They've been opposing him and harassing him. And what is his response? He weeps. And the word there implies like a wailing kind of weeping. Not just a tear that came down. He was literally like dry, weeping. And he laments, if you had known in this day the things that make for peace, but they've been hidden from your eyes, he said. And so he's weeping for the very ones who are about to kill him and have been opposing him. When was the last time you wept for those making your life hard? Not once would be my answer. Not even close. I mean, I think there was one time I was like a little sad, but that was about as close as I got. Jesus is not even, he's not angry. He's filled with sorrow for those who oppose him. And the reason why is because they have a false sense of peace. They believe that the presence of the temple, because Jerusalem was where the temple was, and the temple represented God's presence. And they believed that the presence of the temple and that all of their religious activity in the temple, it was a sign that God was with them and would protect them. But in reality, Jesus says they have a false sense of peace. Everything is not okay. In reality, they're full of injustice. They've been rejecting the very messenger of God. And Jesus warns them, they are headed for a confrontation with the Roman Empire. And when that comes to pass, it will result in the destruction of the city, in the destruction of the temple, and the death of thousands. Some have estimated even 1 million people died in that when that happened. But notice his response. His response is basically one of love. In his love for them, the first thing he does is weep over their condition. The last act he will do that week is to lay his life down for those very people. Laying his life down as the ultimate substitute so that those who believe can actually experience true peace and they can avoid the destruction to come. He's disrupting. He's weeping. He's acting out of love. But then we go on, and the first thing he does says Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling, saying to them, "It is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a robber's den." And so when he arrives in this city, he heads right to the temple. And in this prophetic act, because in the tradition of the Hebrew prophets oftentimes acted out their prophecies. And so he's kind of acting out this prophecy. And he's overturning the tables. He's driving out the money changers. He's disrupting their religious system, the very system that is giving them a false sense of peace. And he echoes the prophecy of Jeremiah about the coming destruction of a warning. He says, it's supposed to be a house of prayer where you seek the Lord's will. And instead, it's become a den of robbers. What he means by that, if you think about what does a den represent for robbers? It's a hideout. It's a place of safety. They go out and they do their thieving, and then they go back to their den to hide from and protect themselves. It's like a cover for their thievery. And Jesus is basically saying, that's what this house, this temple has become. It's become a cover for you. You're acting in ways you shouldn't be acting. You're leading the people into a confrontation with Rome. And then you think the temple is the place of protection because it represents God's presence. And you do all your little religious activity. And you think you're okay, but you're not okay. It is a false sense of peace. And so he confronts it with the truth of what will happen if they reject his path and continue on their own path. So we need love. We also need wisdom. Notice that Jesus did not turn over the tables every time he went into the temple. He did it once. Some scholars think maybe twice. Proverbs says, the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. Haste leads to poverty. In other words, I'm not bringing this up as an excuse to just start running around and start overturning tables in the name of Jesus, right? And this teaching, what I'm saying about fighting with integrity, it can be dangerous if you don't capture the heart of it, right? Someone's probably here thinking, I can't wait to get out of this gathering so I can go tell someone what I really think. You know, I've always hated your guts. Before Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, he said, blessed are the poor in spirit. When you recognize your own brokenness. Be humble. Don't think you're always right. You can and you will get things wrong. Blessed are the meek, right? Meek does not mean timid. Meek means not self-promoting. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Those motivated by love, not by hurt, not by vengeance. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness. Of course, the goal is always genuine peace, reconciliation, a better relationship with others. But in order to do that, oftentimes we need to have confrontation. Lastly, we want to make sure we have the peace of Christ within us. Jesus says, peace I leave you, my peace I give you. Not as the world gives, do I give you. There is a reason just about every letter in the New Testament starts or ends with grace and peace to you. Not just a nicety. It's actually at the heart of the Christian life. Peace, if you will, is an internal disposition in which we're whole and complete on the inside. It's actually a fruit of the Spirit. It's a byproduct of those who live by the Spirit and follow the Spirit. But you can be at peace on the inside, and then sometimes we have to have a confrontation. We have to disrupt a false peace when things aren't right. For those of us like me who are more on the let's avoid conflict at all costs, that never leads to true peace. Denying how I was feeling, denying whether I was hurt, denying when I was upset, didn't bring about true peace. All it really did was cause me to stuff it and get bitter and angry on the inside. And it led actually to my passive-aggressive, here's the way I'm going to get back. I'm going to fight. I'm just not going to do it because my personality is not one for being confrontational. I'll just do it by ignoring you, ignoring what you've said, resisting on the inside. Yeah, so It's actually going to be in your practice guide this week. She's like, I don't care about the practice guide. I'm avoiding it. Yeah, I mean, there really is. So in the practice guide this week, there's a couple of exercises. Some of them you can do on your own. It's a really great exercise. It's called the Ladder of Integrity. And I don't have the notes with me, so I can't go through it all. But it's basically, the way I like to think about it is, first is always getting yourself right on the inside. And part of why I emphasize, like, the peace of Christ within us. When things aren't right, in a relationship, if you have been hurt or you're upset by another person's actions or something they have said, that being hurt, being upset can be a common or normal human response. The problem is when you, of course, then try to have a confrontation from that place of hurt or being upset, you're almost inevitably going to say or do something that doesn't actually help the situation, but actually makes the situation worse. Like, how often have you said something that later you're like, I wish I had never said that? You're in a moment of anger, you're in a moment of whatever, and something comes out of your mouth. That's not very kind. That's a form of dirty fighting. It's like biting or slapping or gouging someone's eye. And if we just do that like verbally, right? And so I would say the first step for me is always get my heart right. Before I have any kind of conversation that might be more on the confrontational side. And when I mean confrontational, what I'm talking about is there are times where something is not right in a relationship. And you may be hurt, you may be upset, you may feel like someone is behaving in a way that is not right, and it's affecting the relationship or relationships that you're involved in, and we need to have a conversation about that. There needs to be a confrontation on something like that. It's very difficult to do. And some people, and the errors that I'm trying to point out we tend to make is, one error is to avoid the conflict altogether. Let's just pretend like everything is okay. Let's not say anything. And then the second thing that we can do is we can have the confrontation, but we do it in a way that's not helpful, right? So the first thing is always to get your heart right. Deal with the anger, deal with the hurt, right? And that's just do that through prayer. We've talked about this many times in terms of being able to do an exchange with Jesus where you bring your hurt, you bring your emotion to him, and pray through that. The other thing that I always do then is I'm a very big proponent. I think one of the best skills you can learn as a human being is something called self-awareness. It's actually kind of a rare thing. But self-awareness is the ability to have an awareness of what is going on inside of you. It's an awareness of your strengths. It can be an awareness of your weaknesses. It's also an awareness of your habits, your patterns. A lot of the ways in which we deal with relational conflict, we learned growing up in our family. And not all of those things that we learned in our family were helpful. We learn sometimes bad patterns, and being able to recognize those things, and then being able to find out like what is going on. My wife likes to tell a famous story. One time, one of our anonymous children mouthed off to her, and she got a little upset. And I asked her the question, why are you so upset? And now she was no longer mad at the child; she was mad at me, and I kind of deflected it. I don't think that child ever thanked me for that, but anyways. He was like, didn't you just hear what happened? I'm like, yeah, I heard what happened. I'm going to deal with that, but why are you so upset? And it was just an opportunity to really try to get to the root of, like, what was it that triggered that? There's always sort of this assumption we tend to carry that if I get upset because of what someone does, it's their fault that I'm upset. Right? You made me angry. Can I just tell you, that's just a falsehood. That's just not true. Now, someone may have given you an opportunity to express the anger that you feel, but it didn't actually create the anger in you. There's something else going on. There's something triggering it. Good friends of ours, Dennis and Jennifer Clark, like to talk about anger as a fruit. It's not the root, it's the fruit. Right? There's something else. Maybe you feel hurt or whatever that's causing that. And it's good to be aware of that and to deal with those things. And so the practice guide this week has something called the Ladder of Integrity. And it's designed basically to help you go through a process where, one, you're kind of figuring out what's going on inside of you. But you're also being able to clarify. It's really good to think through, like, what are your goals? What are your expectations? You know, what are your values? And to be able to have a productive conversation. And my wife is not happy with the job I'm doing, so she's going to do a better job.
Yeah, your time. No, I want to actually I kind of want to mock something for a minute so you can kind of see.
Oh, are we going to have a fight?
We're going to have a fight. I paid for an argument. Did you pay for an argument? I paid for an argument. It's funny.
That's one of our favorite lines.
It's from a movie that we saw, so every
Monty
time Monty Python. But whenever something happens, it's like, well, I paid. He goes, you're getting mad. I'm like, well, I paid for an argument. So, but one of the things, we were having a discussion recently, and we were just kind of talking about something that was bothering me. And as I shared it with him, you know, I was becoming very self-aware that inside, you know, you ever get that mad? You're kind of like, inside, you're kind of like buzzing like caffeine. I don't know, but you can feel the anger inside, you know. So anyways, I said to him, well, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm like feeling that buzzing going on. And he goes, well, that's good. You're self-aware. I'm like, but what was really good was it was okay for me to hear that, because a lot of times you think you're not supposed to feel these things. And the thing is, when you're hurt, you are going to get that feeling. And I always thought I had to not have that feeling. Anger couldn't be expressed or it couldn't be around. So when he said, no, it's okay to feel that way, I was like, oh. And then he goes, and by the way, I'm actually feeling a little angry right now, too. I'm like, oh, you are? And I'm like, well, you're not looking angry, because I look angry, my whole face. You know, he's like, everybody can tell how you're feeling. It's all on your face. And but he was like, I'm feeling a little angry, too. And I was like, really? And all of a sudden, I felt better, because I felt like it was like, he's feeling the same thing, so it's like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, sometimes you think there's something wrong with you. Like, everybody else has got it all together, and I'm the one who doesn't, right? I don't know if you feel like, but that's how I feel. Like, everybody else looks like got their whole life together, and it's like, well, I don't, so there's something wrong with me. So when I heard, he's like, well, I'm feeling angry too. I'm like, well, what do I do with that? And he's like, okay, well, let's just talk to Jesus and say, okay, take that anger, because I don't want the anger to be what causes me to behave. You can have emotions, but we want to have control over our emotions. We don't have to bury or pretend they don't exist. But when you have an emotion that's not a God emotion, you figure out, why is it there? And I felt it was there because I wasn't getting my point across. But then when he says, I hear you, it's like, okay, I am getting my point across. So the anger, you know, you don't have to rule how I behave. I can now have control over my anger. I don't have to get frustrated. I don't have to get mad. And I can actually begin to let that inside feeling, that buzzing anger feeling, it began to go away. And it was like, oh, wow, Jesus, you really are in the midst of our conversation. So, but for me, I thought I'm not supposed to feel these emotions. Any emotion that's not of God, I'm not supposed to feel it. I'm not supposed to, you know, just ignore it. So it was really helpful to realize we have these emotions. You're going to feel them. But what we need to learn to do is overcome them. And when I shared it with him, and he said, yeah, me too, all of a sudden it just seemed to break down that power that was kind of, you know, there. So it's just, one thing I have noticed about it is, you know, when you do start to share, well, you hurt me when you said this, well, you hurt me when you said that, trying to stay humble. Say, okay, God, you know, but I was right to say that because you did. Nope. It's not the point to be right. The point is to hear what he's having to say. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, yeah, I really wasn't 100% right. I was only 99%, you know. But that's the thing. It's like you begin to realize, yeah, you know what, maybe I'm not as right as I thought I was in that situation. You know, he might have a little bit of a point. But the thing is... No, I'm bringing Joe up to make it serious, but it's so true, because when you start to have conversation, and the other thing I learned from him was that when I say something, especially if I'm mad, I say something, and he helps me to actually he's like, okay, this is what I heard you say. I'm like, that's not what I mean. He goes, okay, well, try again. So then I'll say it again. He goes, okay, well, this is what I'm hearing you say. It's like, well, that's not what I mean. And so he helps me and then eventually I keep saying, he goes, okay, is this what you mean? I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. So when you have discussions with people, don't take their exact words that they say as exactly what they mean. A lot of times, if you're like me, I have to talk a lot to get out what I'm actually meaning and trying to say. So when you do have discussions with your husband, your kids, your friends, don't take it for face value, the words they say. Talk to them and say, okay, but this is what I'm hearing you say. And then it helps them to kind of come back. Okay, this is now what I'm hearing you say. So then it makes it, it's just, I don't know. I find that very helpful, because we will say things, especially if we're frustrated and mad, that we don't mean. So if the other person can say that, well, I hear you say that I'm a jerk. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm feeling. No. And they say, well, no, that's not really what I'm trying to say.
You're finally listening.
Yeah, you're finally listening. Now fix it. But I don't know. So I wanted to give you some practicals, but the biggest thing for me, I'm very emotional. I'm a very emotional person, and I thought, I'm going to go back and see what you just did. So I need to know that those emotions, to have them, is human, but it's not Jesus when I act on them. Okay? I used to, well, I'm only human. If you have Jesus in your heart, you are no longer only human. You are a human with Jesus Christ expressing his life through you. So we can overcome our emotions. The problem is I just needed to know that, and I needed someone to help me through that didn't get mad at me when I was mad. He's like, okay, I see you're mad. Let's do this. Bring it to Jesus. I'm really mad right now, God. It's really unfair. You let Jesus do that, and you say, okay. And then from there, then you can begin to have conversations. So I wanted to share that, because I'm a person who has to have something a picture, then I can see it, and then I can dissect it to something that I can actually understand. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, did you do something more?
Well, I did, but it didn't actually pertain to the message. It was to what Kevin was sharing earlier. So I just kind of wanted to.
Well, I also want to make sure we also hear the other side for those who are more like me.
Oh, there's another side. oh, wait, this is what I'm hearing you say. I'm hearing you say that other people are more important too.
No, for those who are like me, would rather avoid conflict and not say anything.
Right.
And that happened a lot in our early years. And
yes, it did.
Instead of just being able for me to be able to just say exactly how I was feeling, or if I was angry and upset with you, I didn't want to have that conversation. So there's that avoiding things. And that's the other side. That doesn't help. Learning how to be able to go. Jesus said, if your brother has offended you, go to him and tell him. That's a confrontation right there. Now, the other side of that, which I would love for us to be able to hear as a community, is if you have to learn to be the kind of person who, when you have been hurt or offended, and I'm not talking about stuff that you can just forgive and let go. Right? Like there's a whole bunch of stuff you can just be like, you don't have to like every little thing. I'm talking about when you've been genuinely hurt or upset with someone who's done something you feel is wrong. Learning how to go to them is very important. But implied in that is also you have to be the kind of person that someone else can come to and tell you, what you did hurt me, what you did upset me, what you did offended me. I think what you did was wrong.
Without when he would do that, I'm like, well, you did this, that's why I did that. That was not good. When you would, yeah, that's not good. I didn't hear him. I was defending myself.
Yeah, and so one of the best skills you can learn, it was actually part of the practice guide a few weeks ago, is listening skills. Learning how to actually listen to people. The way you know you're listening is when you're not responding, you're not judging, you're not reacting. I've lost most of you in the room already. And you're asking questions to try to clarify and understand what the person is trying to tell you. But the reason why this is so important, the reason why I wanted to actually have a message on this as part of our community series, particularly as part of what we talked a few weeks ago about being a community of reconciliation, is that this is actually important as part of that, is learning how to have the difficult conversations. And peacemaking and reconciliation is not about avoiding conflict. It's about doing conflict the right way, about how to have the right kind of conversations. Jesus said stumbling blocks are inevitable. If you get two people in a room together, at some point they will probably have conflict. Never mind a community of 300 people. And we're not going for conflict, it's just that it is inevitable. How do we handle it well? How do we bring about genuine peace in relationships? And if we avoid conflict, we won't experience true peace. Or if we engage in conflict but do it in ways that are not helpful, we'll also not experience peace. And it's learning both of those together that is important.
Yeah, that was the other thing too, is kind of like, well, I'm just telling you in love. You know, it was truth. It's just true, you know, but the thing was my heart was not full of love. So you can give someone truth, but if your heart is full of anger and hurt and hatred, it doesn't matter how true what you're saying is, because there's nothing attached to that. God's not going to attach his presence to something that's filled with ugly. Does that make sense? It could be true. And I could be speaking truth to you. Well, I'm just speaking truth in love, brother, sister. But the thing is, if it's not embraced with love, it doesn't matter how true it is, because God will not, he will not cover that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the other thing, too, I learned when in our conflict was that you also have to, as you learn how to have conflict, each one of us has to figure out how we do it. You used to say, we will have this discussion, but I need to go and spend some time. I can't do it right now. I'm like, nope, we're doing it right now. He's like, I can't do it right now, but my windows are open. I have to close this window. And he's like, no, I have to. So I had to learn to give him time to go do what he had to do to prepare so that we could both be in a good place. Does that make sense? So just don't expect your friend, your spouse, your sister, your brother, your kids to do it the way you do it. We're all different. So we all want to learn how we handle conflict together. So.
Yeah, just one last comment and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating that Jesus said that the peacemakers are going to be persecuted. Which is, when I first read that, it seemed very counterintuitive to me. Why would those who are seeking peace be the ones that people insulted and opposed, right? And, but I think it really gets to the fact that we are not particularly good at handling confrontation. And those who are willing to do it are going to find that it's not always well received. And that's why I was saying, not only do we have to be able to go to a brother who has offended us, but we need to be able to receive a brother or sister that we have offended. Because that's usually oftentimes where the breakdown happens. When Jesus would confront what he considered to be falsehoods or lies or false peace, people didn't be like, oh, thank you. Oftentimes it was, crucify him. Yeah. And so...
Stop talking about me. All right,
yes. Yep.
So, what if you have a situation where you maybe been offended, somebody did something, you've actually gone to that brother or sister, and you expressed yourself, and you didn't get the, resolve that you're looking for, and you're still like in that position with them, and you've released forgiveness to them, whatever you've done, your part.
So the question is, if you've gone to someone and they're not being well received, they're not wanting to listen, and things aren't getting resolved. Yeah, so I would say, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, forgiveness is one way, reconciliation is two ways. It takes two to reconcile. You can't force a reconciliation on a relationship. You can seek it. Paul said, do everything in your power to be at peace with all men. But he recognized that that's not always possible because it requires a reciprocation. So in that case, when you're dealing with a person who has hurt or offended or done something wrong in the relationship and they're unwilling to have a conversation, to listen, to make a change of attitude or behavior in that relationship, then I would say at that point, while you can continue to reach out for reconciliation, you can also set boundaries. And I won't go into it this morning, but it makes perfect sense to set boundaries to really, in other words, we're not called to be doormats and just let people mistreat us and abuse us and say mean things or whatever. That's not what Jesus means by being a peacemaker. That's actually false peace. That's just avoiding conflict by doing that. So you have the right to be able to set appropriate types of boundaries if someone is refusing to reconcile and continues in inappropriate type behavior. And there's all kinds of boundaries you can set, but that'd be my quick answer to that. Yes, it's 11:30, time for us to wrap up and pray.
We're going to wrap up. Parents can go get your kids, your blessings. So are we still doing worship anyways, or no? Okay. All right, so yes, I just want to close in prayer. Jesus, we just thank you. We thank you for how much you teach us and how much you love us and how much you want us to share your love to others. God, I ask that you would take these messages that we've been taught today and help us to spend time with you and help you to unpack it in our hearts so that we would know how to move forward in what you're doing and bring life, that we would bring life to our families, life to our friendships, and life to our church family. God, thank you. We bless you for all that you've done and all that you teach us. We love you. And help us to love one another as you've loved us. Amen.